While I fully appreciate and freely acknowledge that my first PvP matchup wasn't exactly my channel's magnum opus, being more of a mental fidget toy than an actual academic concept, you know what? Sometimes you just need a break from all the highbrow stuff, and now I think I found more of an equal pairing for Starkiller. For those who aren't already familiar, the layout of this matchup format is a little different than you're probably accustomed to on YouTube. Rather than looking at this from a lore point of view, I'll be taking this as though both characters were dropped into an esports-style PvP tournament with all their original game's loadout, specs, and quirks. Last time I pitted Starkiller from the Force Unleashed Ultimate Sith Edition up against the Skyrim Dragonborn, and it turned out to be much more one-sided than I'd originally thought once I started to actually look over the numbers. I won't spoil the results of that, though I'll link it in the description if you want to go see the damage for yourself. But after doing some proper research, I've come to the conclusion that this matchup should be slightly more even-steven. Other than that, the same format and rules as last time will apply. And of course, if you are a zoomer or just have the attention span of one, timestamps will be afforded for your convenience, either on screen or in the description, whichever I can be least bothered by in editing. Anyway, on with the show. Just like last time, only developer-intended programs and moves are allowed. No hacks, exploits, or non-officially endorsed mods. Next, I will be assuming a 1-to-1 conversion rate for all numerical values. 1 health equals 1 health, 1 magic equals 1 magic, 1 damage equals 1 damage, etc. Both players will be assumed masters of their own games, but utter noobs at their opponents. Both characters will be taken at their theoretically maxed potential. If there's any way to get all their numbers up to 9,000 without breaking the game, that's what I'll do. All mechanics from each game will be ported over and applied to both combatants equally, so players will have to strategically adapt to any novel abilities or damage forms their game has no inbuilt countermeasure for. And finally, no followers or co-op, and no environmental, quest-specific, or otherwise external abilities, items, or power-ups. Anything that can't be made a part of the character's default loadout is illegal in my arena. And of course, no menu pausing, no aim assists, no cheesing the game mechanics, etc. As we established last time, Lord Starkiller is in all ways the same as the regular base game's version, only with much cooler armor and with all his powers and stats maxed out by default. Like we established in the last match, Starkiller's a speed freak and acrobatic junkie, his whole MO being to hop, jump, dash, and flip all about the arena like some sort of juiced-up Maglite glow-stick-toting monkey lizard, all the while probing and studying the enemy before instantly pouncing on the first weak point he sees. But while Jaden may be less staccato in his velocity, unlike the Dragonborn, he's more than capable of keeping track of, if not necessarily keep pace with, the Sith apprentice. The reason I say not necessarily is because of two critical elements that Jaden has and the Dragonborn did not: force speed and force jump. The former buffs his movement speed by 75% for up to 20 seconds, or until the player deactivates it, and the latter allows him to jump up to 8 times higher than normal, as well as giving him access to some acrobatic maneuvers like wall running, wall grabbing, wall flip, side flip, and even flip kicks, and the player can even combine the two for a slightly clumsier version of Starkiller's force dash attack, which I'll address properly in the melee combat section. As far as controls are concerned, both characters' cameras are locked in the third person, both have similar handling and motion sensitivity, and both can freely zoom and rotate the camera as they see fit. Overall, I'd consider this section a draw. Both characters have their strengths and limitations, but neither has any particularly exploitable weaknesses, nor is one packing anything the other one hasn't seen or can't easily adapt to. I declare them equal in the movement and control department. While I couldn't find any official source that gives any stats or numbers for the Force Unleashed by counting off the ticks on the in-game health and force meters, we see that Starkiller has 65 points of health and force power potential at his command. The main issue he has is that the only way he can recover health is by killing enemies or by picking up external health packs, neither of which will be an option for him in this contest. However, unlike last time, his opponent won't be walking around with a health pool that would make most population counters look anemic. Jaden has a base of 100 health plus 100 extra energy shield points, denoted by the red and green parts, respectively, as well as having a pool of 100 force points which replenishes at a rate of about 10 points per second. This one's a slight but definitive edge in Jaden's favor. Simply put, Starkiller's complete inability to heal or even negate incoming damage makes him an utter glass cannon. Either he avoids or blocks an attack entirely, or he takes it square on the chin. Meanwhile, Jaden has layer upon layer of ways to make himself functionally immune to about 99% of what the Sith Stalker has to throw at him. These two elements combined makes a DPS contest between them wholly the
farmer's
game, which is extremely unfortunate given the
ladder's
game type and general wild dervish playstyle. Point to Jaden Korr. As we've expressed on no fewer than 3 occasions by this point, Starkiller doesn't wear armor. Whatever non-modded skins he gets are purely cosmetic, and while he will automatically deflect blaster fire, he also has no additional shields or wards.
Edit. Starkiller does have a lightning shield, which can both intercept incoming force attacks and also deal lightning damage when full upgraded. But like Jaden's force heal/protection, it is an active power that consumes force energy while in use.
Though he can block or parry force or lightsaber attacks respectively, and can return projectiles like grenades and rockets to sender, these are both active abilities that need to be manually toggled and timed just right by the player. Of course, there's also the prospect of a force and/or lightsaber lock to consider, a mechanic which both Jedi Academy and Force Unleashed have a version of, although the former primarily deals with saber locks and doesn't award any additional damage bonus to the victor that I know of, and the latter principally does the same with the Force, with Starkiller able to effectively parry lightning in this way if he can mash the button faster than the other guy, so he's not helpless in that regard either. However, that's not the full extent of the problems for Starkiller. Jaden also has the light side powers, Absorb, Protect, and Heal to contend with. Of course, each of these costs force points to keep active, of which he only has 100 himself. Force Absorb prevents Jaden from taking any damage from force attacks, as well as transferring the offending energy to the absorber for up to 18 seconds. Force Protection grants 87.5% resistance to non-force-based attacks, including fall damage for up to 18 seconds, and Force Heal restores up to 25 points of health per use at the cost of only 6 force points. Plus, there's the dark side power, Dark Rage, which makes the player completely invulnerable for up to 30 seconds, as well as increasing their speed by 33% and their damage by 100%. Although it does come with the cost of reducing their speed that same amount after it's run its course, as well as the risk of draining their health down to the very last point if used under inopportune conditions. There's also Force Drain, which transfers the enemy's force points into health for the caster. Although it is worth noting that dark side powers don't work while using Force Absorb, this is ultimately a small price to pay for functional immortality. All in all, this one has to go to Jaden, as Starkiller simply doesn't have any in-house abilities to counter the more esoteric abilities like Absorb. He can't heal himself at all, and he has nothing the opponent hasn't seen, can't counter or can't throw right back just as hard. Point to Jaden. If you've played The Force Unleashed and Jedi Academy, you might think this is going to be a shoo-in for the latter. After all, lightsaber combat is the latter game's claim to fame, and Starkiller's handles notoriously like a glorified baseball bat. However, combat aesthetics and mechanics aside, in terms of their actual combat effectiveness, they have more in common than you might think. Although, having said that, their soul DPS rates aren't even on the same planet. On average, a lightsaber blow from Starkiller does between 4 and 6 points of damage, and a lightsaber throw does around 10 or 12. Same for his Sith Saber Flurry combo, and even when he amps it up with channeled lightning or a force blast, it still only barely reaches up into the double digits. But, like I said, the game's not called Lightsaber Unleashed. Even so, by contrast, Jaden's basic attack does a minimum of 50 damage per swing, with more powerful styles like the Red Strong stance, amping that up by at least 3 times, albeit at the cost of poorer defense. And of course, just as with armor, Starkiller's weapon mods are purely cosmetic, whereas Jaden's offer legitimate and meaningful combat differences. Between the Lone Saber and its combat variants, Twin Sword style, which doubles offensive capacity, and the Saber Staff, which doubles defensive viability, whole video lectures could be made on this aspect of Jedi Academy's combat alone. I might even consider doing one myself in the future. For just now, though, I had been prepared to write out a whole detailed essay on all the intricate styles and combos available to Jaden and how they stack up against Starkiller's one measly Flurry Rush combo. But I won't bore you with that, simply because it won't ever come up against such a primarily force-focused and insistently airborne opponent as Starkiller, which leads me nicely into the deciding point for this section. Would the lightsaber even come into effect in this contest, given the generally evasive style of combat preferred by Jaden's opponent? Honestly, if Starkiller's player is competent, not in the slightest. However, it is worth acknowledging that if the Jedi apprentice is able to get so much as a single hit in with the strong or medium styles, it's pretty much game over for Starkiller. And remember, Starkiller can't heal, so he's going to be taking that hitbox extremely seriously. It's also worth noting, though I forgot to mention it earlier, I'd initially thought The Force Unleashed had a grappling mechanic, but it turns out I was thinking about The Force Unleashed 2, The original only lets you do that sort of thing at the end of combos or in quick-time events.
Also, he forgot to mention that Jaden can be disarmed if he fails a lightsaber lock, or if his lightsaber throw is successful blocked or parried. However, since Starkiller's player will not know this, and Jaden's will, it is as functional moot as the idea of Starkiller spamming Jaden with a force push, since such tactics are of no use whatsoever in his native game.
Again, if I am forced to call this on a probability basis, I have to say it's a draw. Not because they share equal prowess in close quarters combat, but because their relative attributes and proclivities pertaining thereto so perfectly cancel each other out as to render such an event as near to a non-factor as if they both just left their lightsabers at home. Put most simply, if Jaden gets Starkiller into melee range, Starkiller's dead, full stop. And that's before we even think about bringing up dual sabers or the saber staff. But Starkiller has all the tools, and his player has all the prior skills needed to prevent that from ever happening. Sure, Jaden could try to chase him down with force speed, but Starkiller could very easily blast him away with a force push or fling him into a wall while he's doing that, since the force shield goes down while the speed boost is active. And if all else fails, he can simply do a force dash, which would not only send Jaden flying across the arena, it would also take a significant bite out of his health, making it one of Starkiller's most effective tools in this bout. So, once again, I declare the Jedi Apprentice and Sith Stalker functionally equal in lightsaber combat. As is starting to become the trend for this matchup, you wouldn't think that ranged combat would even enter the conversation for a game featuring a Jedi Knight, i.e. the sort of people famous for their disuse of, and general ideological distaste for, conventional weapons such as blasters, grenades, rocket launchers, and so forth. But you'd be dead wrong. And I do have to emphasize the capital D in the word dead. Quite unusually for a Jedi, Jaden comes armed with a full GTA 5 worth of firepower and explosive ordnance. Everything from remote det packs, laser trip mines, grenades, rocket launchers, concussion launchers, blaster rifles, blaster pistols, repeating blasters, ion cannons, flechette launchers, bowcasters, even a disruptor sniper rifle that disintegrates the target with a single fully charged shot. Of course, at least 2/3 of that arsenal is either negated or made a liability against Starkiller's aforementioned defenses, but the disruptor rifle paired with the Jedi mind trick, which makes the user invisible for up to 25 seconds, would make for another total game ender, which Starkiller would have no effective means to counter, save for perhaps saturating the arena with lightning or a PvP-style board wipe by way of a force maelstrom. That said, as with melee, there's still the not-so-tiny problem of actually being able to hit Starkiller with a sniper rifle while he's blitzing around at the speed of a Nintendo copyright strike. So in that event, I have to call this one a draw too, if only by the skin of a ranker's tooth. And, speaking of lightning, Jaden can blast a continuous fan of the stuff dealing considerable damage. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a source giving the exact DPS. From what I can gather watching clips of multiplayer duels on YouTube, it seems to deal an average of around 10 to 20 points of damage per second against an undefended target. And as Starkiller has no passive force defenses, he is weaker against such attacks than the reverse. But as stated, he's not defenseless. He's every bit as capable of breaking out of force grip as Jaden is, and there's always the possibility he could mark any of Jaden's force powers return to sender by winning a locking duel, so Jaden's not got an auto-win button. But even so, the advantage scale is mutual, as button mashing's only going to get Starkiller mashed into a brick wall the very femtosecond Jaden secures enough room to retaliate. And just as with melee, while this sphere might literally be Starkiller's game, Jaden's not at all helpless in this arena, and he has fought force primary enemies before. I therefore declare the two fighters equals in the realm of ethereal battle. So, with all that I've been saying too close to call throughout this whole video, who won? Well, if we look back at our chart, remembering that it's to record who holds the advantage in a given area, not who's actually better at doing what, we come up with a much clearer picture. Starkiller doesn't have armor or shields. He can't heal or absorb attacking energy in any way, shape, or form. The most he can do is block or parry, which, though his player will be exceptionally proficient at given our stipulations at the start, Jaden has the DPS side of things so locked down it's not even a contest. But, as any good fighting game player knows, the only hit point that matters is your last one. So, can Starkiller pummel Jaden into submission before getting his own head lopped off? Well, considering Starkiller also can't heal, he can't do stealth or ranged combat, though he can deflect or redirect most, if not all, of Jaden's other arsenal. He doesn't have a force sense equivalent to see through Jaden's invisibility cloak, and he'd get utterly eviscerated in a sword fight. This fight ultimately comes down to whether or not his force powers would be enough to carry him through. In short, it's possible, but by no means guaranteed. In essence, what we have here is a duel between a sorcerer versus a rogue. Both characters share the same MO, relying on an intricate configuration of techniques and chains of powers to overwhelm or subvert an opponent's defenses. But one just specializes in CQC, where the other does his best work at medium to long range. And if my admittedly limited experience with both games' multiplayer has taught me anything, it's that both are extremely vulnerable against their own tactics when applied with similar skill. Neither one brings anything significantly novel. Starkiller's fought invisible and force-resistant enemies before, and Jaden's not unaccustomed to being ragdolled by people using the high ground or having them literally pick up and hurl the whole home appliance store at him. But in the end, I believe that, despite my repeated admittance of Jaden's technical superiority, Starkiller's bag of tricks combined with his propensity to ragdoll and combo opponents into oblivion makes him the overall more viable adversary. Don't mistake my meaning. If Jaden gets just 1 or 2 good hits in, this battle's over. Starkiller has to be on top of his game, but at the end of the day, I think he has more than enough room for that scenario to be a would-do rather than a could-do type of deal. I declare Lord Starkiller the victor.